Dr. Elliot Rosenbaum, and we're going to be doing the Beat Depression Anxiety Now program. And I want to go ahead and explain a little bit about what this program is all about, and then we're going to have a whole orientation class that will include 6 principles of happiness that are based on research that we're going to be doing the workbook on that have been clinically proven to help people increase their levels of happiness all around. And that's the main focus of today. So right now we're going to go through the orientation to the program. And the way I want to start off with that is by showing you guys a graph. This is a normal distribution bell curve. And it's used statistically in all sorts of different areas, but it's especially used in psychology to help understand the kind of people that we are going to be researching when we research people. Psychologically, we want to understand where people fall in terms of happiness, or in terms of all the different things that we're measuring. And one of the main focuses that research in psychology is focusing on now is a field called positive psychology. And I want to use this graph to help explain a little bit the difference between clinical psychology and positive psychology. And the background of clinical psychology, essentially, if you look at this bell curve, what it's showing is that 68% of all people are going to fall somewhere in the middle towards average, towards a little bit better than average, a little bit less than average. That's most of us. We're falling in that big lump. Each one, if you picture each pixel being another person, that's how many people will fall into the average. And what clinical psychology over the years has been focusing on is the people all the way over here, the 2% or a little less than 2%, who are all the way to the left of normal, and that's the realm of pathology. That's the realm of clinical psychology. That's the realm of, mental illness. That's the realm of clinical depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all of these disorders that fall to the left of normal. Okay, and so through the years, what psychologists have become really adept at knowing a lot about is sickness. And we can tell you everything you need to know about how to be really sick, because we know all the details of all these different disorders. What positive psychology completely shifted its focus to is the other 2%. It started focusing those who were happier than everybody else, who were more successful than everybody else, those who had better relationships than everybody else. And it started studying what are they doing differently than everybody else. And if we can extract what the active ingredients are that they're doing and teach the average man, the average person, and the rest of the distribution curve how to do, we'd be able to move the entire average to the right. And that's the entire realm of positive psychology. And those are the principles we're going to be learning today, and how we can quickly and effectively help people move from average all the way to the right. And under clinical supervision, these are also really useful tools for people that fall all the way to the left here to start moving towards the average and hopefully even beyond. So that's a big focus of what we're going to be doing today, is relying and looking at the research from positive psychology of what we've found studying thousands of people, what makes them happy, what makes them successful, what makes them have better health, better relationships, so on and so forth. What are the different details of that? And then what we're going to have an opportunity to do is go through the Beat Depression Anxiety Now workbook, and go through this workbook. And what this workbook does is it takes all of those principles and brings them down into reality, into practical exercises that we've shown through research actually help people move to the right, move towards a positive range. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. Now, in research, one of the ways that we know things are working is through measurement. We cannot make something evidence-based unless there's a way to measure it. So in this program, we use a very subjective but specific way of measuring the 3 different areas that we are going to be focusing on. Number 1 is happiness, your levels of happiness. Number 2 are your levels of inner peace. And number 3 are your levels of self-esteem. Those are 3 different areas we're tracking, which are the opposite of anxiety and depression. right? If you think about what those things are. So what we're measuring is seeing how you're doing in those areas. And the way that I like to do that is to use a scale, 21-point scale from -10 all the way to +10, with 0 being right in the middle. So if we look at a happiness scale, a -10 would be someone who's really clinically depressed. And those are the signs you'd be seeing are, all the way, as bad as it gets is having thoughts of hurting yourself, hurting other people, really not being able to function in your life, not being able to function. But what we know is that this group falls really to the left of that curve we just saw, where most people are when they say, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling anxious. It's not towards the -10, it's really more to the 0. That middle group where most people fall, they will say, I'm really depressed. I'm feeling depressed. They're still going to work. They're still functioning in many ways. So a psychologist looking at them would say, you don't meet criteria for clinical depression. You're not clinically depressed. And this is the group that we're focusing on, because this is, if you look at that bell curve, is where most people are. They're not clinically depressed, but if you ask them, are you happy? They're also not happy. And removing clinical depression brings you to 0, right? So all of that work that we do as clinical psychologists really just to get people up to normal, up to average. And most people are not happy with that. It doesn't feel good to feel 0. And so what we're going to be working on is, what does the research tell us of what are the +10s doing in their life? What do they have in their life? What are the different things that they're doing? What are the intentional activities that they're engaging in action and in thought, that are making them all the way towards that end? And we can start teaching these principles to people anywhere on the scale and start moving them forward. All right, now, again, this program is geared towards people that fall in the common depression area. That's the realm of self-help. That's what this program is. And, and that's the majority of people. If you find that you're, moving towards a negative, that's how you would describe yourself, as a negative, -5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's a little asterisk there, and you'll see in your workbook what that means is this program really should be done under the supervision of a licensed mental health professional. That doesn't mean this won't help you. Absolutely it will help you. Positive psychology will absolutely help you, but it should be done under the supervision of a mental health provider. But again, most people, they tell you they're, really low negatives, 0, or, they're hovering around the 0 area. The next thing we're looking at, when people say they're really anxious, many of them are really just they'd be more towards the middle of this scale. And clinical anxiety looks like panic attacks, those kinds of things. Sometimes people feel like they're having a heart attack, but it's really a panic attack. They may go to the emergency room. That's more towards the clinical range. But most people, when they talk to us as psychologists about anxiety, they don't really meet criteria for a true anxiety disorder. They're just anxious. Why are they anxious? You're going to see all the things we're going to talk about in positive psychology. They're missing from their life. They're missing meaning. They're missing purpose. They're missing connection. They're missing all these positive things. And when life doesn't have purpose, we know, famous psychologists talked about existential crises we have. And we start feeling really anxious when life is hovering around a 0. That's not necessarily a sign of clinical anxiety. And the last area we're going to look at is self-esteem. This is a little hard to look at, but if you look at people all the way at the negative range, they really start getting into what we call self-hatred. And that's something that really should be supervised with a mental health professional. But for most people, they're not in that area, but they're definitely not feeling good about themselves either. They're hovering towards common low self-esteem. It's really, really common. And we're going to talk about the things that increase all of those things. And what we're going to be doing throughout this program is tracking your levels of happiness, tracking your levels of inner peace, tracking your levels of self-esteem. Okay? So that way we'll know whether or not this is working for you. But what we know is from aggregate research, which is research done over thousands of people, is it helps. These things work for most people. That's why this program is designed for common man, for people with common anxiety, common depression. We've shown that with this group, this work is really helpful. What I'd like you guys to do now is to get comfortable with the tracking process that we use here. And we're going to use 3 different scales: the happiness scale, the inner peace scale, and the self-esteem scale. And this is purely subjective, based on your own opinion of where you're at right now. What I'd like you to do is kind of to think a little bit objectively in terms of where you fall out relative to other people. If you're thinking in terms of -10 on any of these scales being really serious, clinical. If it's self-esteem, we're talking about -10 being really, really negative about yourself. If it's depression, -10 again is clinically depressed, where you're just not functional. You may have thoughts of hurting yourself, so on and so forth. And with anxiety, with the inner peace scale, you're going to have a lot of serious anxiety, where you're having panic attacks and so on and so forth. So most of you are going to be falling, when you get started with this program, towards the middle of this scale. Hopefully some of you will be going a little more to the right here, but the goal is really to be moving you to the right wherever you're at. And what we want to do at this point is to have you track those 3 scales where you're at right now today when you are starting with this process. And we'd like for you to track yourself as you use this for 21 days. So for a total of 8 times every 3 days, you're going to do it today, and then you're going to do it 3 days from now, and so on and so forth, for a total of 21 days. That's 8 times. So go ahead. We're going to use this progress tracking sheet, which is included in your packet. And you're going to see the date. So you put today's date under number 1. And then look at the 3 scales. Happiness, rate yourself from -10 to +10. Inner peace, +10. You're just not worried about stuff. You're really in your mission. You're really process oriented, and it doesn't matter what the outcomes are. You're not concerned about those things. And self-esteem, +10. It's not a narcissist. You're not walking around telling other people how great you are all the time. Certainly not putting other people down. That's actually a sign of low self-esteem. You're feeling really connected with your values, and you're feeling really good about who you are as a human being, because you're finding that you're living your life consistent with those values, consistent with your purpose, consistent with your mission. And that may be, that may make you look really humble, actually. But it's about the subjective feel. I feel really, really good about myself. So go ahead and just track those. After you're done, flip it upside down. It's not to share with anyone in this class. You're doing this on your own. This is for your own purposes, to track how you do in these 3 areas over the next 21 days using this program.